Hello and welcome to the Office of Community Services annual training on the fiscal year 2026 application for the Social Services Block Grant, also referred to as SSBG, and the Consolidated Block Grant for U.S. Territories, also known as CBG. This session will be recorded and it will be shared and available in the coming days following this session. I am Cheryl Zuni, the Interim Director of the Division of Social Services and the Division of Community Assistance within the Office of Community Services. We are thrilled to have you join us today for our webinar. As we get started, I kindly ask each of you to please drop your name, state, or territory in the chat so we can see who is joining us today. Today, our team will go over the annual requirements for funding for fiscal year 2026. In which guidance was also issued via action transmittal on May 12, 2025, and is posted on our website. As we go through the webinar, please feel free to also drop any questions or comments or clarifications in the Q&A section of the chat in this webinar. We plan to save time at the end of the session to open it to any questions and answer those that are left in the chat. As we get started, let's review the agenda for today. Next slide, please. We're going to begin our training with introductions of our SSBG colleagues, with each of them sharing at this current time the state or territory in which they are the lead on. After, we will follow with an overview of the Office of Community Services, SSBG, and its subunit of CBG. And next, we will review the sections of the intended use plan and the pre-expenditure report, the contents of those documents, certifications, and the process needed to submit the materials for the upcoming application submission. Then we'll have a demonstration of the SSBG portal where the IUP and the pre-expenditure plan is submitted, which will be on or before September 1st, 2025. Lastly, we will open it up to any questions, comments, or concerns that the participants have to share with our team. Next slide, please. So let's start with introductions. Each of our SSBG colleagues will provide introduction, and as they introduce themselves, they will share the state or territory in which they are the lead on and assigned to as of the date of this webinar. We will continue to provide notice of the updated SSBG CBG contacts through our listserv and also a refreshed web presence. However, in the interim, if you have any questions about your SSBG program, please do not hesitate to send any of those inquiries to our SSBG box at ssbg@acf.hhs.gov. We will be also dropping that email box address in the chat today. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Butler.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I am Dr. Yolanda Butler, Senior Advisor at the Office of Community Services. I've worked with many of you over the years in differing roles to fill in the gaps of our staffing changes of recent. I am supporting the Social Services Block Grant and the Consolidated Block Grant programs. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me or contact me if you have questions in general or other needs. I will be communicating with those states which I'll be working soon. Thank you. Next, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ollie Richards.
Good afternoon. I'm Ollie Richards, a Pathways intern at OCS. I'm covering the states of Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas, Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, which are regions 6 and 10. And I'll turn it over to Nicola Staples.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicola Staples. I'm new to OCS. And in the interim, I'll be supporting Hannah and Ollie with the coverage of their portfolios. Good to meet you. I'm looking forward to working with you. I'll turn it over to Hannah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Wong. I am a program specialist and economic mobility fellow I cover the states of Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Arizona, California, Hawaii, and Nevada, as well as the territories of American Samoa, Guam, and Northern Mariana Islands, which comprise regions 5 and 9. Also, I have taken note of everyone who submitted in the Q&A that they were unable to access the chat. I have turned on the chat for attendees to be able to chat with hosts and panelists, but if you're still having issues, please let us know. Thank you, and I will turn it over to Tasia.
Hello, I'm Tasia Williams. I'm a Pathways intern also and new to OCS. In the interim, I'll be supporting Hannah and Ollie with coverage of the portfolios. And I will pass it over to Zachary Eckstein.
Hello, my name is Zachary Eckstein. I'm the project director for the SSBG Data and Technical Support Project at WRMA. We do all the development and technical support for ssbgportal.net, or ssbgportal.acf.hhs.gov. And you can reach us by email at any time at support@ssbgportal.net. And we'd be happy to help you with any of your needs when you're entering your data for your intended use plans and for expenditure reports.
Thank you, colleagues, for that introduction. So next we'll go to our overview about the Office of Community Services and the programs. So the Social Services Block Grant, or SSBG, is part of the Office of Community Services, or OCS. OCS has 4 priority areas. 1, administer high-quality programs that reach those most in need. 2, include voices from the communities impacted in all aspects of services. And 3, support initiatives that transcend silos to address the causes and the conditions of poverty for whole persons. And lastly, 4, ensure that our programs are consistent with the priorities of the administrations. The Office of Community Services other programs include the Community Economic Development Program, the Community Services Block Grant Program, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, the Rural Community Development Program, and all that is in addition to our Social Services Block Grant Program. As you may know, the Office of Community Services also often houses demonstration programs, which provide temporary funding to test priority projects. Those who have been around a while may remember some prior test programs, demonstration programs, such as the Assets for Independence Act Matched Savings Program. We're closing out some similar programs this year, and those are listed in light blue on the slide. And they include the Affordable Housing and Supportive Services Demonstration Program, the Diaper Distribution Demonstration and Research Pilot, and the Medical Legal Partnerships Plus program. Next slide for Ollie.
Back to SSBG. The Division Social Services is the OCS unit with federal oversight for the Social Services Block Grant and Consolidated Block Grant. The law creating SSBG is found at the Title 20 of the Social Security Act. The SSBG law allows states and territories to tailor social services programming to their needs and to address each one's unique population needs. SSBG may adjust in-state and territory programming to respond to emergencies, increase in demand, address shortfalls in other programs, grant fundings. The 57 grant recipients include all 50 states, MA Commission for the Blind, DC, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. territories. The Consolidated Block Grant is part of the SSBG specific to U.S. territories. Territories may opt to combine multiple federal programs into one construct. When territories invoke CBG, there's one application only to the SSBG federal office. Territories use all awards of the contributing programs, but adhere only to SSBG's policies. With these grants, they may provide any services as defined by the SSBG law and regulation. Territories can and do operate programs similar to the contributing programs, energy, child well-being, disability services, and more, but are not bound by those other program rules, applications, or laws. What is SSBG? It's a federal grant to states and territories for social services that assist vulnerable populations, including children facing neglect, abuse, or otherwise in need, adults in need, including those with disabilities and seniors, and families facing complex circumstances related to poverty. States and territories use SSBG to improve outcomes and address immediate and long-term needs.
So the purpose of SSBG is for grant recipients to provide essential social services that meet 5 specific goals that are set in SSBG statutory law. These goals are to achieve or maintain economic self-support, achieve or maintain self-sufficiency, prevent or remedy neglect, abuse, and exploitation, prevent or reduce inappropriate institutional care, and otherwise securing referral or admission for the best possible institutional care when needed. And one key feature of SSBG, which you may all already be familiar with, is that grant recipients have the ability to shape, to customize, and mold their programs to community-specific challenges. So to use a purely hypothetical example, let's say that the state of Arkansas were to experience a weather emergency this month that had severe impacts for senior communities. As a result, as Arkansas is preparing its pre-expenditure report and intended use plan for fiscal year 2026, Arkansas may propose to use more SSBG funds to respond to this increased need for housing-related services, or like energy and transportation support, things like that that arise as a result of a weather emergency. And so, like I said, in the intended use plan and pre-expenditure report, Arkansas would then increase its projections for services within the aforementioned service categories for their FY26 grant. Then the following year, for fiscal year 2027, Arkansas may then decide to reduce funding in those service areas if the need no longer exists or is no longer as urgent. And then because each grant recipient has the ability to just differ and customize how they plan to apply their SSBG funds to their programming and to their services, let's say that Louisiana this month were completely unaffected by the weather emergency that affected Arkansas. Louisiana could continue to just allocate its SSBG funds to categories that affect children and youth programming, for example. The point being that the latitude built into the social services block grant allows for a very localized decision-making and therefore completely different SSBG programming between different states and territories. And one further note that I would like to make is that the decisions that states and territories make when deciding how to allocate their SSBG grant funds should be informed by public hearing. There should be a period of public hearing and an opportunity for public input so that state and territory leaders are able to also listen to the needs of local populations directly. We will elaborate a bit more on that later. So each year, as I alluded to, you must submit an intended use plan and a pre-expenditure report. That is why you are all here at this webinar today. These materials will project how the state or territory or grant recipient intends to use the social services block grant for the upcoming fiscal year. The IUP and pre-ex also affirm that the authorizing official will honor the criteria set in law and regulations for receiving and administering SSBG awards. What are those criteria? Well, I'm so glad you asked. According to Title 20 of the Social Security Act, as well as 45 CFR Part 96 of the Code of Federal Regulations, which is outlined on this slide, the intended use plan and pre-expenditure report together must accomplish these purposes. They must identify the proposed services for fiscal year 2026. They must project the populations and amount of grant awards for amount of each grant award for each service category, and project the usage of FY 2026 funds and also any carryover SSBG funds from FY 2025. The materials must record the amounts to be transferred from the temporary assistance to needy families or TANF block grant for use under SSBG, as well as identify any carried over TANF funds from FY 2025. They must detail how the 200% income cap will be assured for the usage of transferred TANF funds. They must identify a plan for how to acquire public input and comment on their pre-expenditure report and intended use plan. And they must provide documentation and proof that these hearings and these opportunities for public input were implemented. Must provide proof of audit, and then also discuss any performance and physical oversight by the state or territory as necessary.
The intended use plan, or IUP, provides an overview of the local needs and details how the state or territory intends to address those needs. The key objectives of the IUP are to show the plan for SSBG funds and basis, identify the programs prioritized, demonstrate compliance with federal policy, establish efficient planning for grant performance and evaluation, and ensure public engagement in the social services plan. The pre-expenditure report breaks down by service or activity, projected recipients by age, and grant amounts. Now, each state/territory uploads the completed IUP and pre-ex to the SSBG portal. The web location of the SSBG portal is ssbgportal.acf.hhs.gov. We'll add that link to the webinar chat and point out that this link is listed on the action transmittal sent to your SSBG contact and authorized official in May 2025. If you do not have portal access as the person responsible for the IUP/pre-ex submission, add your name and state and territory to the chat or send a message to ssbg@acf.hhs.gov. You may also submit an updated authorized users form to support@ssbgportal.net directly. We will help you gain access and direct you to technical support if there are more complex issues. Remember, upload the IUP and/or fill out the pre-ex templates on the portal for fiscal year 2026. Sometimes mistakes are made and info is placed in the previous year. My colleague from WRMA, Zachary Eckstein, will present a demo of the system's functionalities after we walk through the IUP and pre-ex contents. Your intended use plan application should include 6 appendices. Appendix A, public hearing documentation. Evidence may include scanned copies of the notices from website postings, media articles, or emails to local agencies and the public. Appendix B, signed certifications by the authorized state official for the award. For example, drug-free workplace requirements, environmental tobacco smoke compliance, lobbying regulations, debarment, or suspension. The required certificates are on the SSBG portal under Resources for IUP/pre-ex. Appendix C is proof of an audit. An audit is required at least every 2 years by law. Appendix D is the SF 424M mandatory form. This is the application for federal funds. A fillable PDF is available on the ACF website. Appendix E, most recent TANF ACF-196R form. And Appendix F is optional, is the additional tribal documentation in which you would provide info on how your government works with tribes through consultation, subawards, etc.
As we wrap up the tutorial on the IUP, we have some reminders. Ensure that the list of state officials is current for fiscal year 2026. Note any planned TANF transfer amounts and services to be provided and projected beneficiaries. Make sure eligibility of TANF transfer is defined to clearly limit benefits to people with incomes that do not exceed 200% of the federal poverty threshold. Indicate how this will be communicated to local providers and monitored. SSBG TANF transfer is common audit flag. To rectify this, the TANF transfer audit and law compliance issues include proof that the state or territory has measured limit eligibility for all TANF transfer funded services. This must be clear before each IUP and pre-ex is greenlit for the fiscal year 2026 funding. For child and adult and older adult, what are the age ranges? For the U.S. territories that consolidate, clearly include all grant programs and dollar amounts planned for the grouping into the Consolidated Block Grant or CBG. Make sure the programs align with the standard form 424 or application for federal assistance. When it is time to submit the IUP, certifications, etc., there can only be one file per fiscal year. You may upload a combined PDF file for the IUP, signed certifications, and other documents. You may also use a zip file for all the documents. If a modification is needed, say a certification is missing, ensure that the full package is resubmitted, as the new upload will replace the combined PDF document or zip file.
So the pre-expenditure report, which is the second half of this application process, I suppose, it is completed directly within the SSBG portal, which I provided a link to in the webinar chat. You will answer 3 sections when completing the pre-ex. The sections are titled Definitions, Expenditures, and Recipients. I think that a lot of this will be easier for you all to understand once you watch our colleague Zach actually take you through a demo of the portal, but to give you just a purely verbal description of some of the key things you will have to accomplish when filling out your pre-expenditure report. As the grant recipient, you will have to project the following years. You have to project what sort of services you will be using SSBG funds to fund in the following year. There are 29 service categories as defined in 45 CFR Part 96. You will project like which of those service categories you intend to fund services in. And then in the pre-ex, you will also record how much funding you project to spend in each service category. In the pre-expenditure report, you will also be asked to break down the source of that funding in these main categories, which would be the current year, or by that wording, it would mean the upcoming fiscal year SSBG allocations, any carryover SSBG funds, any transfer from the TANF block grant, any carryover from TANF transfer, and then whether any other local, state, or federal funds were used to support any of the services that were funded by SSBG. So all these service categories, as I said, are defined in the Code of Federal Regulations, and they are defined they're listed in the pre-expenditure report. So you just have to fill things out. And we will also ask you in the recipient section to estimate the number of participants you expect or recipients that you expect to receive or partake in these services. Finally, the form will ask you to note whether the services are targeted at children, adults, or seniors. As a reminder, careful planning for the year is linked to SSBG performance and efficiency measures, by which we mean that the pre-expenditure report and intended use plan will be compared with the post-expenditure report that is submitted at the end of the fiscal year. And as a sort of like rule of thumb, planning differences and differences of like less than like 15%, give or take, between the projected amount spent in each service category versus the amount that was actually spent would demonstrate efficient planning. That being said, we do understand that a key feature of SSBG is its ability to be used to accommodate differing and emerging needs, including throughout a fiscal year. So in the event of an emergency, one common example would be, again, like an extreme weather sort of situation. Regular SSBG grant amounts and service projections may be modified by the state or territory during the year to aid in recovery, by which we mean like grant recipients have the ability to go into the SSBG portal and modify their pre-expenditure report directly to reflect significant changes in where they allocate their SSBG funds and how much is spent in respective service categories. Nonetheless, we encourage sort of careful planning to be precise in how SSBG funds will actually be carried out and allocated throughout the year. it may be useful to include some, I suppose, like leeway for, and like some resources for emergency services, or just like planning for emergency situations that may come up throughout the year.
As we wrap up our discussion on the pre-expenditure report, let's look at some key points to remember. 1, ensure consistency. Check to make sure that services identified in the IUP and pre-ex report match. 2, match data. Ensure that if funding is allotted to a service, there are recipients projected. Conversely, recipients in a category should mean that funds are allotted for that category of service. 3, align age-specific service categories. Child-related service categories should only have child recipients. For example, daycare, children, or child protective services. Adult-related service categories should only have adult recipients. For example, adult protective services or daycare adults. If there's a valid explanation, please include such in the form. 4, financial information. If there are SSBG or TANF transfer or consolidated block grant carryover, make sure that this is clear so the balance projected includes all resources. These are just some additional key points for double checking before submitting your package to avoid delays. Next, my colleague Zach from WRMA will provide a live demo of the portal.
Hello, everyone. So when you first log in to the SSBG website, you'll complete your multi-factor authentication process via a code to your phone or using an authenticator app on your phone. You will land here on the home page of the website. As a grant recipient, the main place that you'll want to be going is to our forms dropdown to submit your intended use plan and your pre-expenditure report. So we'll take a look at the intended use plan page. And here we can see we have a space to upload our intended use plan file. We'll want to double check our year in the dropdown and over here kind of in this display to make sure that we haven't changed this and it's still loading, that this is what we expect it to be. Now, if we take a look, here I have a folder on my desktop that has all of the files necessary for my intended use plan submission. Each of these forms in its blank version is available for download on the SSBG website under the link for compliance info. You'll be able to download each of those forms a blank version. Once you have all these forms and you've filled out your intended use plan, which is a form fillable PDF, you'll need to find a way to either combine all of these into one single PDF that retains the form fillable nature of the IUP, or you can take all of these files and place them into a zip folder. To do so, you'll simply select all of the files. I'm clicking and dragging to do so. And then you can click these three dots to compress to zip file, or right click. And in the menu, you'll see compress to, and we can select zip file. Now, whichever file was the main file or the file we right-clicked to create the zip will be the default name. And this will work fine for our test purposes, but you may want to rename this whatever makes sense for your filing purposes. So in our zip file, we have all of the PDFs that we need, the form fillable intended use plan form, as well as all the certifications that we've completed, and we're ready to go. Now, you can click Choose File to go through your file select dialog. You can also drag straight onto that space here, your zip file, and it will select that one as well. Now that we've done so, we'll go ahead and click the Submit button and confirm that we want to submit. And we'll give it a moment to verify that our file has been accepted and hasn't been rejected for a connection reason or a virus detected, etc. If you do have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A widget, the questions widget, to send those in. We'll try to respond to those as we go. Here I am on the test website, so this may take just a moment. But as you'll see, We'll get a little success message at the top of the page in green that lets us know our file has been uploaded. And we will be able to click the View Intended Use Plan button to download the file we just uploaded so we can check it to make sure that what we've uploaded is exactly what we intended. Once you click Submit and Confirm, you will no longer be able to resubmit a new submission unless you complete a request to revise. So on this one, it's very straightforward. We submit our thing and we're here. We're now in the status for review in process, which means our program specialist in OCS has been informed that we have submitted our intended use plan. If we do need to make a resubmission, something was wrong, we were missing a certification, and we noticed, I'm going to click Request to Revise. I'm going to type an explanation in our explanation bubble. And when I click Send Request, that's going to send a request to my assigned program specialist or the general OCS office to let them know that we're requesting to revise our documents. Here we can see our success message that that's been sent. And once that request has been reviewed, they will approve it in OCS and go ahead and update your form to resubmission requested. And when they do so, you'll receive an email to your email connected to your account to let you know that you are ready to come back in and edit your file and resubmit. We'll keep moving forward now and take a look at the pre-expenditure report. So once again, at the top of our pre-expenditure report here, which we reached by going to Forms and clicking our pre-expenditure, we'll double check our year in our dropdown and on our little sign side over here to make sure that we have the correct one we're filling it out for. On the pre-expenditure report, we'll indicate whether or not we're reporting on a state or federal fiscal year for purposes of this SSBG report and our calculation of our expenditures and the recipients for those services. Underneath that, here we'll see our 3 tabs that we have on our form for definitions, expenditures, and recipients. On the definitions tab, you're going to identify 3 different contacts. So the state official, your state SSBG contact, and your state CFO. You'll enter their information here. Some definitions for child, adult, and family for the services provided in your grant recipient's jurisdiction with your funds. And finally, at the bottom of this tab, we have the assurances. You'll check to assure things like, for example, no carryover will extend beyond the 2-year expenditure period. So if you carried forward funds, you only have that 1 extra year to expend them. And that the TANF funds that you've transferred will follow all of those required rules, such that those funds are only for services provided to children or families whose income is less than 200% of the official poverty line, applicable to a family of that size, and any other requirements for those particular transferred funds and services funded by those. Down at the bottom, the last 2 are just about TANF funds. You know, have you reflected your use of TANF funds in the pre-expenditure report on the expenditures tab? And will those totals match your ACF 196R form, which you submit as an appendix to that intended use plan? We can move on next to the expenditures tab. Here you can see each of those 29 service categories listed. So coming here across the top for service categories, we have then different funding streams that were expended. So our first one here is going to be your SSBG allocation that you received for this fiscal year. So in our example, this is our FY25 pre-expenditure report. So these are the funds that we are going to be receiving for FY25. Once we submit this application, how we intend to spend those funds is for column number 1. Any funds that we carried over from our FY24 allocation and intend to spend now in 25, we will mark in our second column. So any carried over SSBG funds from 24 that we are now going to spend in 25, column number 2. In our third column here is our current year TANF transfer fund expenditures. So any funds that you transferred in for FY25 and are expending in 25. And our next column is for any funds that you transferred in FY24 that you will now be expending in FY25. Any transferred funds from TANF that were then carried forward and are expended this year. Finally, our last column is our expenditures of all other federal, state, and local funds. If you spent, in this example, any other federal, state, and local funds on adoption services in your grant recipient, you will want to make sure to indicate that total in this column. Any non-SSBG or TANF transferred funds. The last column is an auto total column here, where it will total up the total expenditures, which is your SSBG expenditures plus all other federal, state, and local funds for a view of the total spent for this particular service for your grant recipient. The next items for each row are going to be the provision method, so whether this was provided through a public or private entity or both. And then finally, this last checkbox you must check, and this is to just ask you to double check that you've included all other federal, state, and local funds in this column to make sure you've accounted for all of those spent on that service. You'll go down the sheet for each one of these service categories defined in the Uniform Definition of Services. You can see here we have our totals for the different columns. Then line 31 is for administrative costs. So wherever those funds for administrative costs are coming from, you'll mark those here. And then finally, we have our last total rows and our total SSBG expenditures, which is going to be just the first 4 columns, not including any other federal, state, and local funds. Lastly, for line 34, these are any remaining funds to be carried forward into the next fiscal year. So for example, if you're going to be carrying forward $20,000 of FY25 SSBG funds that you didn't expend, and you plan to expend them next year in FY26, you'll indicate that here. And for any TANF transferred funds that you're intending to carry forward into the next year, you'll indicate that in this one here under the TANF transfer column. For these 2 fields in row 34, they cannot be left blank. So if you do intend to carry forward 0 funds, you can go ahead and indicate that by putting a 0. If you leave this blank, as we'll see, it will result in an error that we will need to correct before our submission process is complete. For our last tab is going to be the recipients tab. We have the same structure of the 29 service categories listed, and then our age categories that we ask you to report by, whether children as defined by your state, adults age 59 and younger, 60 and older, adults of unknown age, and then 2 auto total columns for total adults and the total recipients. Next, we ask you if these amounts are actual estimated or sampled data. So for the pre-expenditure report, these are going to be estimated for each one. And depending on how you count it or calculate it, it might be different for your post-expenditure report. The duplicated or unduplicated counts amounts to how you count the number of recipients. So for example, that may differ between congregate meals, where each meal served may be an unduplicated count, whereas someone who receives counseling services and attends 3 different sessions might only be counted once as an unduplicated count or 3 times with a duplicated account, depending on how you count who is receiving what number of services for each service. We next have the eligibility criteria box for each of the service categories. This is where if you're, for example, expending TANF funds for this service category, you'll want to make sure that you're annotating how you're getting those financial criteria to meet that 200% of the federal poverty line for the family of the size involved, and any other specific eligibility criteria for this service in your grant recipient. Down at the bottom here, we have a few questions. The first one is going to be from which block grants were these funds transferred? The answer here will always be TANF. And if it is not, please let us know, and we'll work with you to figure out what's going on there and how we can note that. Next, we have please list the source of these funds. This is going to be the double star from the other federal, state, and local funds column. So to the best of your ability, in total, where is these other federal, state, and local funds coming from? Different block grants, different state grants, specific state pools of money, local pools. Any information you can give us is extremely helpful in this area. And then our next comment box here we have is for list other services. So for our category number 29 for other services, these are services that are not covered by the other 28 defined services, but still somehow address one of the 5 statutory goals that we reviewed earlier for the SSBG. So if you are providing other services in this category, please explain what those other services are and how they meet the statutory goals, so that we can make sure those align with the goals of SSBG. Finally, if you have any other additional comments that you need to make to your program specialist or for your report, you can put those here in the additional comments box, and those will be captured for them to review. At any time as you're working through this pre-expenditure report, you can click the Save button and save your current state of where you're at. There is an automatic timeout if you do leave this page idle due to security reasons that we cannot lengthen, unfortunately. So please make sure you save any work that you have entered if you do intend to step away. And the next time you log back into the website, the form will be in whatever state you saved it in. Once you're confident you've completed everything on the report and you're ready to submit, we'll click the Submit button and confirm. If we have any errors, we'll see them like this here in red. Our form was saved, but it cannot be submitted until we address our errors. So we're going to take a little look, and we're going to see, first off, we have to make sure we enter any eligibility criteria for case management. So we missed that. And then we also, as demonstrated, we left one of those boxes in line 34 blank. So we'll take a look at those 2 errors. We'll do the line 34 box first. So here, as I said, these line 34 funds to be carried forward cannot be blank. So we'll turn that back to 0. And on our recipients, this was for case management. If we take a look, we said we had 100 recipients of case management. So we'll type some example criteria here and make sure we expend some funds for it here. Now that we've made these corrections to these errors that we found, I'm going to go ahead and try to submit again and confirm. And what we should hopefully see is a successful submission that will let us know our status of our report is now review in process, as we can see here, which means our OCS program specialist or the OCS office has been informed that we have submitted our report and it is ready for their review. If we do see that we have any mistakes that we need to correct and we can't make any edits after we've submitted, what we can do again is go down to the bottom and click the Request to Revise button. Give our explanation of why we need to revise. I made a mistake, data entry, whatever it may be. We'll send our request, which will send an email to your program specialist or the OCS office. They can review that request and change your report to resubmission requested, which will allow you to edit it. And you should get an email once that status is updated. That pretty much covers everything about the intended use plan and the pre-expenditure report. So again, if you do have any questions, please put them in the question and answer or into the chat. I can see the question and answers panel, but I don't have sight on the chat right now. So if I'm missing any in there, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll just take a look at 1 or 2 more things in the website, and then I'll hand it back over. So a few more things to point out. Again, you can always reach us at support@ssbgportal.net if you have any questions. We're happy to respond to your emails or do even screen share sessions with you to help you walk through the process. If you need to download any of the forms like the IUP or certifications, those are going to be available under the compliance info link. There will be some folders where you can select the items that you need. If you want to review any of the recorded webinars, you can access our playlist on YouTube by clicking the webinars link, and that will open up a new tab with the webinars playlist. And in a few weeks, this one will be directly at the top of that list for you to review. And lastly, if you click on our dashboard button here, what you'll see, and this is our test website, so some of our data is old, but you'll be able to take a look at our SSBG data dashboard to download the national data set for the year you select, and then just kind of basically review the data for each of the states if you so choose. We have this feature on our website as well. And you can filter by particular service category for recipients, or if you want the colors to correspond to expenditures for, let's say, just self-sufficiency services, if you were interested in that. And maybe just TANF funds for self-sufficiency services. You could see who's doing a lot of that. Okay. That's my tutorial. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to my colleagues at OCS. Thank you very much. And once again, I'll be around to answer any questions if you do have them.
Thank you, Zach, for that very thorough overview. At this time, we'll take a look at the question and answer session or section to see and recount some of the questions that have been submitted and just give a quick answer of those questions, and then see if there are any additional queries, and you may submit those to us as well. So the first question is what is included in the all other funds column? Is that for the entire service category or just the specific services? And so the all other funds category captures all other local, state, and federal funds for that particular purpose, not including the allocated amount of SSBG that your state or territory put into that category service or transferred TANF funds that are used for that service. So as Zach mentioned, if there were other block grants, say the child care development block grant was used for child care services as well, then you would include that amount there if you were using SSBG for child care as well. And if there were any other state funds or local funds that were to be added to that particular portion. The next question was, will there be a recording or link of this training that will be sent out? And the answer to that is yes. We will share with you a link to the training as well as a copy of the slides. And there is an ability to access this information on the SSBG portal, which takes you to the YouTube site for our training sessions. So we'll make that easy for you and also share with you a direct link after we have compiled this recording, and we will transmit it to our listserv, and then you may share it with other colleagues who may not have been able to join this call. There was a question for clarification about how to determine or what goes into the all other state funds. And here I offered a summation that you should, to the extent possible, we're asking you to capture any other resources that are used there and we report on that information in our annual report, and it is informative to our oversight committees in Congress and people in the administration who are interested in how these funds for social services are used. I believe that was the last question that we have at this time. In terms of contacts, we're still sort of ironing out as we are adjusting to our staffing changes, and we will make sure that that information is shared with you. If your contact person was not identified today, you should have something from our office shortly as to whom you should reach out. And in the interim, we invite you to send questions to our program email, which is ssbg@acf.hhs.gov. That's ssbg@acf.hhs.gov. And if there are questions that are technical, that is support@ssbgportal.com. Thank you.
Thank you to all our state and territory partners for joining us today and for our webinar training session. We look forward to a successful fiscal year 2026 application period. As mentioned throughout the webinar, if you have any questions specifically to the submittal of the application or any questions on the implementation, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at ssbg@acf.hhs.gov. As a reminder, all applications are due on or before September 1st, 2025. So we thank you for participating today and have a wonderful rest of your day.